What happens to the soul and the spirit when we die? Okay. So you asked it interestingly. You said, what is my interpretation of that? It's not something that I actually feel qualified to have much of an interpretation of. I'm a scientist at heart, a spiritual scientist now, but a scientist from even before I came into spirituality. And as I've been blessed to be living this life for now more than 21 years, I've held on to aspects of science. And one of the important aspects of it for me is that I would never claim something as my truth that I hadn't actually experienced. Now, one of the ways that I break away from science is I'm very open to experiences that are beyond the five senses. So my experiences are not limited to things that I could see or smell or touch or hear or taste. I believe that we have other senses than just these five. These five are great, but I don't think they're the only ones we have. And I've had experiences that I cannot explain, describe, or interpret through these five senses, but they've been experiences I've had. Death is not one of the experiences I have any recollection of having had. Well, some people have. I mean, some people have very, very vivid, personal experience and knowledge of that. I am not someone who has a personal experience of a memory of what it's like to die. I have experiences of what it's like to live as the soul and the spirit, but that was while I still had a body. It was just beautiful, incredible, divine experiences of not identifying as the body, of experiencing the infinite nature of who we are that's not bounded by the body. But in terms of what happens after death, I'm going to have to give you that which I've heard, that which I've learned, and it's important to share that because I like to be really clear that it's either something I've experienced or personally intuit, and this is something that I've heard, I've learned. We have several different bodies to us, and I'm not going to go into a whole talk on that. It's very, very sort of esoteric philosophy. But what's important is that we have our physical body, which is obvious. We all know what that is. And then we have what's called a subtle body. And in the subtle body are aspects of us, our mind, for example, that actually are said to travel with the soul into our next incarnation. So this body doesn't go, which means that this brain doesn't go. Usually I use mind and brain pretty interchangeably, but in this case there's actually a distinction. The brain doesn't go, so I might be fantastic at calculus in this life. I'm not, but that's just an example. That wouldn't go with me. I might have learned 20 languages in this life. That wouldn't go with me. That's stuff that is stored actually in the gray and white matter of my brain. And the reason we know this is get a brain injury, have a stroke, and suddenly you lose it. Take certain drugs that impact certain areas of the brain, you lose it. When we speak about the mind, it's much more what in Indian culture they call sanskaras, which are the impressions And again, when we're speaking, usually we use them interchangeably with neural networks and neuronal patterns. But here it's different because those networks and patterns don't go, but the impressions go. The impression goes. So if you could think about writing on a pad of paper. Okay, and you're writing on a pad, you write a love letter. Now you pull the piece of paper off the top of the pad, and you crumple it up and you throw it in the garbage. Somebody else comes and they pick up the pad. There's no love letter. It's all gone. No ink whatsoever on that pad. But having written on the pad has left impressions onto it. The words aren't there. The ink isn't there. But the pad has been affected by it. Impressions. There's actually a whole science of this in water and stuff that I won't go into, but it's really interesting. In any case, so impressions on our mind, that goes with us. What happens with the soul is one of two things. If we still have karma in our karmic bank account, either good karma or bad karma, we have to come back to empty that account. This is how in the spiritual tradition we're taught about the law of karma. Why do we keep coming back? Why do we keep taking birth again and again? Because we've got fruit of karma that we need to finish off. You know, it's like, anybody ever have a parent who said you are not standing up from this table until you finish what's on your plate? And if you stand up now, you're going to come back and find it here at breakfast. It's sort of like that with the universe. You've done this act, you've performed this karma, now you're going to get the fruit. Some of it you're going to get immediately. Some you're going to have to eat a few years down the line. Some may be next lifetime's karma. So we take birth in a body, in a family, in an environment that is most conducive for us to work through that karma and to take our next step closer to God. And this is where it's important, as a slight digression, to mention, to reiterate, that in a situation like that, it's not about good karma and bad karma. It's about most conducive situation and least conducive situation. So most of us see someone who's born in a really rich family. They've done nothing to earn it, but you see this kid, the silver spoon in his mouth, got everything. You think, God, what did that kid do that was so good in a past life? That here he's been born in this life with not a care in the world. And then you see children in abject poverty and you think, God, what did they do for such bad karma? But it's not like that at all. It has nothing to do with good or bad. For the first child, whatever his karmic bank account was, this family, this wealthy environment was going to be the most conducive for him to work through that. Whereas this child over here living on the side of the road was going to be the most conducive for him to work through that. Or because we're actually all interlinked and interlocked and interconnected. Or the child on the side of the road was there because in addition to it being conducive for his karma, he was going to be the one you were going to see when you rolled down your car window, and in seeing him sparked such anguish in you that in order for you to fulfill your karmic debts, for you to fulfill what you needed to fulfill here, you needed to experience the anguish of seeing that child so that you would know what your life was supposed to be about. And for you to take the step of opening up schools and orphanages or, whatever it was. So his karma is connected to yours. He's there on the side of the road, not because he did something bad, but because that's the most conducive environment for him, for you, for everyone who walks by him to learn how not to look away. Because all of the people who walk by him who have to learn how to not look away needed to learn that lesson in this life. And if there was no one in abject poverty, we'd have nothing to look away from. So we're actually all interconnected in that way. But so we come back for that. Or if you have attained what is called moksha or liberation, you don't have to take a body again. And that's when they say you just become one with God. But as Pujya Swamiji reminds us all the time, that's possible even with the body. The body is not the hindrance to union with God. The ego is the hindrance to union with God. And tragically, the ego is not tangible. It's not something that you could flush down the toilet or drown in a lake. And that stays with you also. So that moksha, that liberation that would lead you not to have to take another body is something that actually we can experience even with the body. And then you get souls of the enlightened masters who are really free, really there, but who choose to come back in a body to help the rest of us. So that's in general what it looks like. We do know that there's different reasons for which sometimes souls don't necessarily take a body right away after death, that sort of hang around for a while, but eventually they all will, because we all have to work out the karma. But lastly, we speak about individual souls. Your soul, what's it going to do after your body dies? My soul, what's it going to do after my body dies? And actually it's a fallacy. It's more true than you are your body and I am my body. So we're getting closer to truth if we talk about your soul and my soul. But we're not actually quite there yet, because the truth really is just it's all one soul. And all of these individual distinctions are actually part of this illusion, this drama. You know, Thich Nhat Hanh, the beautiful Buddhist scholar, says enlightenment is when the wave realizes it's the ocean. When the wave realizes it's the ocean. So you could have as many different waves as you want. And we could sit on the shore and we could say, wow, it's a really, stormy ocean. And you could count 1 wave, 2 wave, 3 wave, 4 wave, millions of waves. But ultimately, if the question were, well, rather than counting waves, tell me what the higher truth is. That's a wave or that's ocean? Now, on some level, they're both true. There is a wave form. It's not an optical illusion. Line 10 people up, they'll all tell you wave. And yet, if you had to choose one or the other as the highest, deepest truth, clearly ocean is truer than wave. And the reason that we know that is ocean is permanent. Wave is very temporary. It may be true right now, but the moment you blink, that truth is over. And for something to be highest truth, it needs to last more than a split second. And so when we speak about our individual souls, even though, yes, they are longer lasting than our individual bodies, ultimately they're drops returning to the ocean. They're waves of the ocean, whichever analogy works better for you. For the moment, they're in a form. That form has taken a body. But really at the core, they're just soul, not yours, not mine, not hers. Just like the highest spiritual truth is there's nothing but God. You know, we talk about, first we say, well, you know, the Hindu God, the Buddhist God, the Jewish God, the Christian God, that, you know, whatever, and even within the different religions, okay, so all of the different gods. So a higher truth than that is there's actually just one God, many forms. But a higher truth even than that is there is nothing but God. And all of the forms, whether forms of God in what we envision of as forms of God, whether it's the Buddha, whether it's Lord Krishna, whether it's Jesus Christ, whether it's Prophet Muhammad, however we may conceive of the divine when he, she, it came in form on earth. What we know is that higher than that is that from which that form came, which of course every one of them told us, so I'm not saying anything that they didn't say themselves. But higher even than what each of them came from is that each of them came from the same place, which is the same place every one of us comes from, and that there's nothing but God. So the truth is there's no coming, there's no going. There was never a time that you weren't. There'll never be a time that you're not. It's just wave forms in the ocean. But ultimately the ocean is always there.